Okay, so this takes into account the situation where the trig functions aren't the same. Sine of inverse cosines, those aren't the same trig function. And I didn't look closely enough, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be of this format. Trig function of inverse trig function, because inverse trig function you can make an angle. Alright, so that's, I probably should have looked closer, but I'll verify. If it is the other one, if a weird one shows up, just bring it to my attention on Monday and we'll talk about it then. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be trig function of inverse trig function. Alright, what I want you to get into your heads about this is an inverse trig function is an angle. Okay, just like any other thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to invent an angle. I'm going to invent, let's call it beta. I like drawing betas. Alpha's getting a little boring, but betas are kind of cooler. All right, beta is going to be inverse cosine of 2/5. All right, anytime you see an inverse trig function of anything, that's representing an angle. It's going to represent an angle in the correct quadrant for that function. Okay, so cosine lives in the first quadrant positive, second quadrant negative. So does secant. All right, tangent, cotangent, secant, or cosecant, and sine all live in the first or fourth quadrant positive, negative. They're not going to tell you what quadrant you're in, but it's going to be kind of like those problems we did before, where it says the cosine of the angle is 2/5, and you're in first quadrant. That's just another way of saying that same thing. So if I were to draw a vector representing this angle beta, it's going to look like that. I'm going to draw a right angle down here in the corner. Oops. We're trying to draw a right angle in the corner. And beta is going to live right there. You always go from the x-axis to the slanted line when you're drawing these things. And I know that cosine of beta is 2/5, which means the adjacent side is 2, the hypotenuse is 5. I'm also paying attention to the directions I'm going. I'm going to the right and up, right, or I'm going to the right, positive, and then the slant's always positive. All right. As far as this is concerned, the opposite side, if I did the Pythagorean theorem, let's just call this W. 2 squared plus W squared is equal to 5 squared, which means W squared is equal to 21, which means W is equal to the square root of 21. All right. So what I want you to do when you see this type of problem, trig function of inverse trig function of anything, draw a triangle representing the inverse trig function and name it something. Your favorite Greek letter. If you don't like Greek letters, your favorite regular letter. I don't care what you call it. Name it something. All right? And notice beta is equal to this thing, and beta has a picture right here. And if I change cosine inverse of 2/5 into beta, this problem here can be transformed into sine of beta. I have a triangle drawn that has a beta in it, and it's asking me to find sine of that angle, right? Mm-hmm. Sine of beta is opposite over hypotenuse. There's your answer. Okay. So again, get it in your mind about these things. Anytime you see trig function -1 of anything, it's representing an angle. It can be drawn every time. If it says inverse cosine of 1/2, that's on your sheet. You can do that. Inverse cosine of 1/2, that's pi over 3. Sine of pi over 3 is the square root of 3 over 2. Done. But if you have something that's not on your sheet, you can draw a triangle to represent it. Again, cosine positive, secant positive first, negative fourth. Sine, cosecant, cotangent, tangent positive first, negative second. Draw it properly. And again, going to the right, positive, going up, positive. The direction you move affects the signs on those horizontal and vertical sides. The hypotenuse is always going to be positive when you're doing these. And that's how to handle those. That's everything your homework's going to throw at you in this section. And again, if you have, it says sine -1 of cosine, yeah, I don't think those happen. But if they do, we'll tackle that on Monday. Just don't do that one. Just maybe put a little star on it and say, Mr. Klein will tell me how to do that on Monday, and I'll show you, and we'll get through that. Okay?